The morning my mother-in-law changed the locks. I was standing in the driveway in -22 with a grocery bag in each hand and my car keys between my teeth. I want you to picture that for a second. 2 bags of groceries. The good stuff too. Because I'd stopped at the Sobeys on Wonderland Road specifically to buy her the sharp cheddar she liked. The kind that comes in the black wax. And the sourdough from the bakery counter, not the pre-sliced bread in the plastic bag. I had bought her fancy cheese in a blizzard, and she had changed the locks. I stood there for probably 30 seconds before I accepted what I was seeing. My key didn't turn. I tried again, still nothing. I put the bags down on the step, the concrete was already glazed with ice and I could hear it creaking under my boots. And I knocked. Nothing. I pressed the doorbell, I could hear it chiming inside, nothing. My phone was in my coat pocket. I pulled it out and called my husband Owen. It went to voicemail on the second ring, which told me everything I needed to know about whether he'd picked up when she'd called him first. I'm going to back up because none of this makes sense without the full picture. Owen and I had been married for 2 years when we moved into his mother's house. That part was supposed to be temporary. That's what he told me before the wedding. It'll be 6 months, maybe 8, just while we save for a down payment. The market is insane right now. His mother, Vivian, lived alone in a 4-bedroom colonial in Byron, the kind of house that has a formal dining room nobody ever eats in and a finished basement with crown molding. She had the space. We had the debt. It made sense on paper. What Owen didn't tell me, or maybe didn't fully understand himself, was that Vivian had never once in her 61 years shared a home with someone she didn't consider subordinate to her. She had raised Owen and his older sister Colette as a single mother after their father left, and she had done it with a kind of iron discipline that she seemed to confuse with love. Everything was structured, everything had a rule, and anyone who questioned the rules, including apparently me, was threatening the entire system. For the first 4 months I tried. I cooked dinner twice a week and left the kitchen cleaner than I found it. I asked before I invited friends over. I watched the programs she wanted to watch even when they put me to sleep. I kept my opinions about her curtains and her passive-aggressive notes about the thermostat to myself. I was so careful, so relentlessly diplomatic, that I sometimes lay awake at night cataloging the things I hadn't said and feeling vaguely proud of myself for not saying them. And then one Tuesday in October, I made the mistake of answering a question honestly. We were sitting at the kitchen table, me, Owen, Vivienne, and she was talking about Colette's new boyfriend, who was apparently not serious enough about his career. And she looked at me and said, "You understand that a man's ambition tells you everything about his character, don't you, Ren?" My name is Ren. I know, but my mother was a birdwatcher and she named both her children after things she loved, so there you have it. I said, I think ambition is one piece of it, but I've known some very ambitious people who were genuinely not good people. That was it. That was the entire crime. She looked at me the way you look at something that has tracked mud onto a white carpet. She didn't say anything. She just looked, and then she turned back to Owen and said, "Your wife has interesting opinions," in a tone that made the word interesting sound like a biohazard. After that, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic, not at first, it was small. She started leaving the light off in the hallway where I kept my shoes. She started scheduling dinner at times she knew conflicted with my work calls. She started conversations with Owen in the kitchen and then stopped talking when I walked in. She told Owen, not me, Owen, that she felt her home wasn't being respected. She started referring to the house as my home in a way that had a very specific emphasis, like she was reminding me whose name was on the deed. Owen heard her out, and then told me, with the kind of exhausted diplomacy of a man who has spent his whole life being the buffer, that maybe I could try a little harder. I asked him what that looked like specifically. He said he wasn't sure. I said that was a problem. We fought about it, more than once. And every time, the fight ended the same way. Him saying he understood my frustration, but she was his mother and she'd sacrificed a lot for him. And me saying yes, that was true, but I was his wife. And him going quiet in a way that didn't feel like agreement. By December, I understood that the 6-month timeline was not happening. The market was still insane. Our savings account was real but not quite enough. Owen was not willing to have the direct conversation with his mother that would have made her uncomfortable in the short term and saved us all enormous amounts of misery in the long run. And I was stuck, but I was also still trying. That's the part I want you to understand. Even in December, even when I already knew how she felt about me, I was still trying. I had bought her that cheddar. I had driven to the Sobeys in a snowstorm because she'd mentioned offhandedly at breakfast that she was out of it, and I actually thought that doing something considerate might soften something between us. Instead, I came home to a locked door. I knocked again. I called Owen again. This time he picked up. "Where are you?" I said. "Still at the office." "What's wrong?" "Your mother changed the locks." Long pause. What? Changed the locks. I'm standing outside in -22 with groceries I bought for her and I can't get inside. Another pause. "She mentioned she was getting them rekeyed." I thought she meant next week. She didn't mean next week. Okay, I'll call her. "Owen." "Yeah. If she doesn't open the door in the next 10 minutes, I'm driving to my mother's." "Ren, come on, 10 minutes. I hung up. I picked up the grocery bags and stood there and watched the thermometer on my phone read -22 and thought about how the bread was going to freeze solid if I stayed much longer. I thought about the 7 months I had spent trying. I thought about the hallway light. I thought about your wife has interesting opinions. I thought about a lot of things in those 10 minutes. The door didn't open. I drove to my mother's. My mother Jillian lives in a bungalow in Lambeth with 3 cats and an extremely strong opinion about everything. She's 70 years old, recently retired from 32 years as a family court judge, and she has the kind of calm that comes not from not caring but from having seen so much human catastrophe that ordinary rudeness no longer registers as a threat. She opened the door before I even knocked. She must have seen my headlights and took one of the grocery bags out of my hand and said, "Come in, there's soup." No questions yet, just soup. I sat at her kitchen table and ate the soup, and then I told her everything, not just the locks, everything. The 7 months of it. The hallway light and the dinner schedule and the interesting opinions and Owen's inability to choose. And the way I had been so careful for so long and it hadn't mattered. And somewhere in the middle of all of it I started crying, which I hate, but there it was. My mother listened without interrupting, which if you knew her would tell you how seriously she was taking this. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You have a copy of your marriage certificate?" she said. "Yes." "Why?" "Because Vivienne owns that house, which means she has the legal right to rekey the locks. But you have belongings inside, which means you have the right to access them with proper notice." That's the thing people forget. The law in Ontario doesn't care about feelings. It cares about property and process. "Mom, I don't want to sue her. I want to get my stuff out of her house." "I know. But I want you to understand what you're working with before you do anything." She poured more soup into my bowl without asking if I wanted it. I ate it. Over the next hour she helped me think through it clearly. I had no legal obligation to that house. I had no mortgage on it, no lease, no claim. But I did have a husband whose name was on a lease that had never actually been signed, which meant our financial arrangement with Vivienne was entirely verbal, which meant it was functionally nothing. Which meant we had been living there on her goodwill, and her goodwill had just run out. I called Owen again at 9 that night. He was home by then. He'd gotten in with his key. Vivienne had kept him on the original lock, of course. And apparently they'd had what he described as a difficult conversation. "What did she say?" I asked. "She said she feels like you don't respect her home." "What did you say?" "I said you do and?" He paused. "She said if things don't change, she's going to ask us both to leave." "Owen, I know. She locked me out in -22. I know. She said she didn't realize you'd be home so early. She was lying." Pause. "Ren, I don't know that she was lying. She knew exactly when I'd be home. She mentioned at breakfast that I had meetings until 4. She timed it." He didn't say anything for a long moment, and then he said, "I don't know what to do here." And I said, "Yes you do, you just don't want to do it." I slept at my mother's that night, and the next night. Owen texted. He called. He came by on Thursday evening and sat at my mother's kitchen table and looked so uncomfortable I almost felt sorry for him. Except I also felt too tired to feel sorry for anyone. "She's always been like this," he said finally. "When Colette's ex moved in, same thing. She drove him out in 8 months. And you thought it would be different with me? I thought you were tougher." I looked at him. "I am tough. I lasted 7 months. I bought her cheese in a blizzard. Being tough doesn't mean being a punching bag indefinitely." He put his hands over his face. I know, you're right. She's my mother, and she raised us on nothing. And I feel like I owe her." "You can love her and still protect your wife." He looked at me like I'd said something he'd never considered before. Which, apparently, I had. My mother, who had been very quietly making tea in the other room in a way that was definitely not eavesdropping, came in and set 2 mugs on the table. "Owen," she said, sitting down, "I'm going to say something and I want you to hear me out before you respond." "Can you do that?" He nodded. "I've spent 32 years watching families make each other miserable in family court. I've seen parents who genuinely love their children, and also, genuinely cannot stop controlling them. I don't doubt that Vivian loves you, but what she did last week was not an accident and it wasn't a miscommunication. It was a message. And the question isn't whether Ren should have been nicer or tried harder. The question is what kind of marriage you want to build, and whether you're going to build it on her terms or yours." Owen was quiet. "There's a 2-bedroom in Wortley Village that a friend of mine owns," my mother continued. "She's been holding it for a tenant she trusts. I called her yesterday. It's yours if you want it. First and last reasonable rent, available February 1st. But it's only available for the next week." I looked at her. She hadn't mentioned any of this to me. She met my eyes and raised one eyebrow. "You called her yesterday?" Owen said. "I did. You planned this." "I prepared," she said. "There's a difference." He stayed for another hour. He didn't say yes, not that night. But he didn't say no either. And when he left, he hugged me in the doorway for a long time without saying anything, which felt more honest than anything he'd said all week. He called Vivian the next morning. I wasn't there for it, but he told me about it later. And I believe his account because he has never been a particularly good liar. He told her that we were moving out. He told her we'd get our things by the end of the month. He told her he loved her, and that wasn't changing. But he was a married man, and his wife was not going to be treated the way she'd been treated. And if Vivienne wanted a relationship with him going forward, she needed to understand that Ren came with him. She told him he was choosing wrong. He told her he hoped she'd reconsider. She didn't respond. We moved into the Wortley Village apartment on February 3rd, 2 days late because of a snowstorm, which felt cosmically appropriate. It was a second-floor unit with old hardwood floors and windows that rattled when the wind hit the right way, and a radiator that ticked and clanged all night until you got used to it, and I loved it immediately and completely. For the first 3 weeks, Owen was quiet and a little sad in the way you're sad when you've done something right that hurt. I didn't push him. I cooked and we watched things and we took walks when the weather allowed and I let the sadness have its time. His sister Colette called me, actually. Not Owen, me. I didn't expect it. "I heard what happened," she said. "Yeah, she did the same thing to me. Except I wasn't married, so I didn't have anyone in my corner. I'm sorry." "Don't be. I just wanted to say. He made the right call, and she's going to come around, eventually. She always does. It just takes her a while to accept that she's not the main character in everyone else's story." That made me laugh out loud for the first time in weeks. Vivienne did not come around immediately. There were 2 months of silence which was uncomfortable for Owen, but which honestly I found peaceful. No notes about the thermostat, no pointed remarks about my opinions, no coming home to a locked door, but things don't stay suspended forever. In April, Owen's aunt, his mother's younger sister, a retired nurse named Bev, who had opinions of her own, and had never been afraid to share them, apparently sat Vivian down over Easter dinner and said what several people had been thinking for some time. I wasn't there, but Bev told me later with a certain amount of relish. I told her, Bev said that she had run off Colette's relationship. She had nearly run off Owen's marriage, and if she kept it up she was going to end up a very proud and very lonely old woman. And I told her that changing the locks on your daughter-in-law in -22 is not a misunderstanding. That's a choice, and choices have consequences. "What did she say?" she cried. Bev said. "Which she never does, so I think it landed." Vivienne called Owen in May. She asked if they could have lunch. "Just the 2 of them." First, he went. She cried again apparently. She said she knew she'd gone too far. She said she hadn't known how to share her home and her son with someone she didn't choose, and she'd handled it in the worst possible way. Owen called me after. "She wants to know if you'd be willing to meet with her," he said. "No pressure." I told her it was entirely your call. I thought about it for a day. Not because I was performing consideration, I was actually considering it. I thought about the 7 months. I thought about the hallway light. I thought about the grocery bags on the icy step. And then I thought about Colette, who hadn't had anyone in her corner. And I thought about Owen, who had finally found a way to say the right thing even when it cost him. "Yes," I said, "I'll meet with her." We met at a cafe on Richmond Street, just the 2 of us. She looked older than I remembered, which surprised me, because it had only been 4 months. She'd ordered coffee before I got there, and she was holding the mug with both hands when I came in, and she looked, for the first time since I'd known her, like someone who wasn't sure how things were going to go. I sat down, I ordered tea. I didn't fill the silence right away. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Of course. I want to apologize. What I did was, it was unkind, and I want you to know that I know that." She paused. "I don't always handle things well when I feel like I'm losing control of a situation. I've been working on understanding that." I looked at her. "I know you love Owen," I said, "and I know you didn't raise him to have things handed to him. I respect that. But I need you to understand that I love him too. And being in his life doesn't mean I'm taking something from you." She nodded slowly. Bev said something similar, in considerably more colorful language. That almost made me smile. We sat there for an hour and a half. We didn't resolve everything. That's not how it works, not really. But we said the things that needed saying, and she listened in a way she hadn't before, and when we left she put her hand briefly on my arm in the doorway, just for a second, and said, "I'd like to try again if you're willing." I said I was. It's been 7 months since that cafe meeting. We're not close, Vivienne and me. I don't think we ever will be, not the way some people are with their in-laws, not the kind of relationship where you call each other on Tuesday afternoons for no reason. But we're civil. More than civil, actually. We're careful with each other in a way that feels like the beginning of something. She came to our apartment for dinner in September. She brought wine. She said something nice about the floors. Owen cried in the kitchen when she left, just a little, and he didn't think I saw him, and I didn't say anything. I just handed him a dish towel and he laughed. My mother asked me recently if I regretted any of it. The moving out, the confrontation, the whole difficult year of it. I told her no. And then I told her the truth, which was more complicated, that I don't regret it because it needed to happen, but that I wish it hadn't, because it hurt people I care about, including Owen, who spent 2 months being quietly sad and who deserved better than to be caught between two people he loved. She nodded. "That's very grown up," she said. "I'm 29, I said. "I know, it still counts." She poured me tea. She's always pouring tea. And we sat in her kitchen, and one of the cats came and put its head on my foot, which is a very small thing but which made everything feel for a moment completely fine. The apartment on Wortley still rattles when the wind hits the windows. The radiator still clangs. We have a lease now, an actual signed one, with our names on it, and I look at it sometimes just because I can. It's a small thing to be proud of, but it's ours.